Have you ever looked around at your life, a stable job, a roof over your head, maybe even people who care about you, and still felt nothing? Like something's missing, but you can't quite name it? That strange hollowness deep inside. It's more common than you think. And no, you're not ungrateful or broken. There's a deeper reason why so many people feel empty, even when everything looks fine. Ladies and gentlemen, today we'll talk about a psychological experience that millions go through silently. The emptiness that lingers even when life appears perfectly in place. We often believe that when we achieve certain things, a career, a relationship, a degree, we'll feel fulfilled. But the reality is, many people arrive at those destinations only to find that the feeling they expected isn't there. They've checked off every box society tells them to, yet inside, they feel distant from themselves. Why does this happen? One of the key reasons is emotional disconnection, not from others, but from ourselves. Psychology calls this emotional dissonance, the conflict between what we do outwardly and what we feel inwardly. It's when your external life doesn't reflect your inner emotional truth. Imagine waking up every day, going to a job that doesn't light you up, smiling at meetings because you have to, not because you feel joy. Imagine constantly being busy, productive, efficient, but not passionate, not inspired. Over time, this disconnect turns into numbness. You go through the motions of life, but you stop feeling life. In therapy, this is often seen in clients who say, "I don't even know who I am anymore," or "I've lost myself." That's not an identity crisis. That's an emotional silence that's grown too loud to ignore. It's the cost of living in survival mode for too long. It's what happens when your mind is managing life, but your heart has been left behind. And the truth is, this kind of emotional emptiness doesn't always come from trauma or heartbreak. Sometimes it's the result of living a life that looks good on paper, but doesn't feel like yours. Maybe you're living by other people's expectations, your parents' dreams, society's timeline, or Instagram's version of happiness. Maybe you become so used to being fine that you stopped asking yourself what actually feels right. Now here's where it gets deeper. When we ignore our inner emotional world for too long, our nervous system adapts to the numbness. The brain starts filtering out deeper emotional signals because they're seen as non-essential. You're not feeling joy, not because you're incapable of it, but because your brain has been trained to prioritize functionality over feeling. You've been surviving, not living. That's why someone can be in a stable relationship and still feel lonely, or have a successful career and still feel like they're wasting their life. Emptiness doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It often means something is missing within you. Your own presence, your own truth, your own voice. And when this emotional disconnection becomes chronic, it can even show up as physical symptoms. Fatigue, brain fog, a heaviness in the chest. Not because there's something physically wrong, but because the mind and body are carrying the weight of unspoken emotional distance. So what's the way back? It starts with tuning in, gently, without judgment. Ask yourself, what part of my life feels out of alignment? What am I doing out of obligation? And what do I do out of genuine passion? These aren't questions you answer once. They're questions you live with. Reconnection isn't about quitting your job tomorrow or starting over. It's about creating small moments of emotional truth. Journaling, meditation, walking without a podcast, sitting with your feelings without running from them. Reconnection is built through honesty, first with yourself, then with others. Because when you begin to live in alignment with what you truly feel, not just what you should do, the numbness begins to fade. The spark returns. And slowly, that empty space inside isn't empty anymore. It becomes a place where your true self begins to speak again. So the next time you feel hollow in the middle of a life that seems okay, don't rush to fill it with distractions or guilt. Sit with it. Listen. That emptiness may not be a void. It may be a doorway back to your emotional self. Some emotions never leave. They simply wait. And sometimes they resurface in the quietest moments, when life is calm, when things appear stable, when everything around you is finally fine. That's when the silence inside grows louder. It's not because something is wrong with your life. It's because something is unresolved within you. People often underestimate the power of unprocessed past experiences. The childhood you thought you outgrew, The heartbreak you buried under distraction, the grief you never cried out, the pain you never gave words to. These things don't disappear just because time moves forward. The human mind isn't built to forget. It's built to protect. And it does that by storing emotional pain in the background, hoping you'll come back to it one day when you're strong enough. But that day often never comes. Life gets busy. You learn to smile. You succeed. You move forward. And yet, some days, especially the quiet ones, you feel hollow, as if something inside you still aches, still waits to be acknowledged. This emptiness is not random. It's a signal, a sign that your emotional system is still carrying unresolved experiences. The past doesn't always show up as memories. Sometimes it shows up as patterns, self-sabotage, emotional numbness, sudden anger, or unexplained sadness. You might not remember exactly what hurt you, but your body does. Your brain does. Your nervous system does. Many people walk through life with invisible wounds, not because they lack love or stability now, but because they never receive it when they needed it most. A parent who was emotionally unavailable, a friendship that ended in silence, a moment of deep pain that no one noticed. These events become emotional imprints, and when they're left unprocessed, they shape the way you feel in the present. The truth is, you can have everything you once wished for and still feel empty if your emotional history remains untouched. Because fulfillment isn't just about what you have. It's about what you've healed. When emotions are pushed aside rather than processed, they don't just vanish. They freeze. And over time, that frozen energy becomes emotional exhaustion. You might find yourself constantly tired, unmotivated, or disconnected. Not because you're lazy, but because your inner world is carrying more weight than your outer life reveals. This is why some people cry during movies without knowing why, or feel deeply sad during moments of peace, or struggle to explain why joy feels so far away, even when there's no obvious reason for sadness. The body remembers what the mind avoids, and healing doesn't begin with logic. It begins with listening, not to others, but to yourself, to the feelings you've ignored, to the parts of you that were told to get over it, or be strong, or move on. Strength doesn't come from suppressing pain. It comes from facing it with gentleness. Unprocessed emotions can also distort your sense of self. You may constantly seek validation because no one ever made you feel enough. You may fear abandonment because love once meant loss. You may struggle to trust not because others are untrustworthy, but because your early experiences taught you to guard your heart. These aren't flaws, they're adaptations. And they deserve understanding, not shame. One of the hardest things to accept is that sometimes you already survived the pain, but the emotional echo remains. That echo is the emptiness, and ignoring it only makes it louder. You can silence it temporarily with distraction, work, entertainment, but it always returns because it's not here to ruin you. It's here to reconnect you with the parts of you that need care, not control. Processing the past doesn't mean reliving it. It means making space for the emotions that were never allowed to breathe. It means sitting with discomfort instead of avoiding it. It means asking yourself not, why am I like this, but what happened that made me feel this way? That shift in question changes everything. It replaces blame with curiosity. It turns shame into self-compassion. There is no timeline for healing, and there is no perfect way to begin. Sometimes it's as simple as noticing, naming what you feel, journaling what you remember, allowing tears to fall without needing a reason. Other times, it requires support, therapy, deep conversation, safe spaces where your truth can be held with respect. But what matters most is the intention, the willingness to stop running. Because no matter how long something has been buried, it still holds the power to soften once brought into the light. And with that softening comes relief, a release, a reconnection with your emotional self, the self that wants to feel again, love again, trust again, and live fully again. So if your life looks fine, but your heart feels empty, don't dismiss that feeling. Don't judge it. Trace it. Follow it. It may lead you back to the very moment where a part of you got stuck. And once you find it, once you face it, you can finally begin to let it go. Not because it didn't matter, but because now you're ready to matter to yourself. There's a strange paradox in modern life. We're told that structure brings peace and achievement brings purpose. And yet, countless people move through their daily routines, wake up, work, eat, scroll, sleep, feeling nothing. There's no crisis, no visible struggle, no dramatic trauma. And yet, inside there's an eerie emptiness, a sense that something important is missing, but they can't quite name what. This numbness doesn't come suddenly. It creeps in quietly, hidden beneath productivity. It disguises itself as efficiency, discipline, or being goal-oriented. But beneath the to-do lists and calendar notifications, there is often a disconnection from self, a disconnection that slowly silences your ability to feel, to be moved, to be present, to be alive. Modern culture praises hustle. It celebrates achievement. You are rewarded when you're busy, validated when you're productive, and admired when you keep pushing, even at the cost of your emotional well-being. You meet deadlines. You meet expectations. But when you meet yourself, if you ever do, there's an unsettling silence. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped feeling deeply. You became functional, not fulfilled. This is the numbing effect of modern life. It's not just burnout. It's emotional suppression disguised as success. You can be incredibly high-functioning and still feel entirely empty inside. You can meet every external goal and still miss the point of your own existence. The pain here isn't loud. It's dull. It's the kind that doesn't scream, but lingers. It shows up in the middle of quiet evenings, in the moments between tasks, in the pause between conversations, when there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. Routine, when disconnected from meaning, becomes mechanical. You wake up not because you're excited about the day, but because you're supposed to. You check your phone, not because you care what's there, but because it's a habit. You talk to people, but never really connect. You work not because it brings you joy, but because it keeps you from thinking. And the scariest part? This kind of life can last for years without anyone noticing. Even you. We are constantly told to chase more. More goals. More growth. More recognition. But rarely are we taught how to sit still and ask, why? Why am I doing this? Why does this matter to me? Is this success actually mine, or just something I learned to pursue because everyone else did? Without emotional alignment, achievement feels hollow. It becomes a game you keep playing, hoping the next level will finally give you the feeling you're looking for. But it doesn't, because fulfillment is never found in the outcome. It's found in connection. Connection to your values, your emotions, your purpose, and most importantly, to yourself. But when we live in a culture that tells us to suppress discomfort, to stay positive, to keep moving, to never slow down, that connection is severed. Discomfort is no longer seen as a signal to reflect. It's treated as an inconvenience. So we suppress. We avoid. We distract ourselves with routines that leave no time to feel. This emotional suppression becomes a habit, a default. You stop asking what you feel and start focusing only on what you do. Over time, the emotional range flattens. You don't just lose sadness, you lose joy too. You don't just avoid pain, you miss beauty, wonder, and depth. You become emotionally muted. This is why many people feel most uncomfortable when they're alone, when they're not performing or producing. Because in that stillness, the emptiness becomes more obvious. The emotions that were pushed away begin to resurface. And the truth is, they were never gone. They were just buried beneath the noise of doing. But that numbness is not permanent. It's reversible. And it begins with presence, not productivity. It begins when you stop measuring your worth by what you accomplish and start honoring what you experience. You start reconnecting with the small things that once brought you life: music, silence, sunlight, creativity. You remember how to feel without rushing to the next thing. You give yourself permission to not be useful all the time, and in doing so, you find your way back to yourself. Sometimes the greatest healing doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less, from letting go of the pressure to constantly achieve, and instead listening to the parts of you that haven't been heard in years. That version of you that wants to rest, to breathe, to feel again. Because no routine, no productivity system, and no list of goals will ever replace the need for emotional connection. You are not just a mind. You are not just a body. You are a whole human, and your feelings are not flaws. They're the very language your soul uses to speak. So if you find yourself stuck in a life that looks perfect but feels empty, pause. Not to fix anything, but to feel, because beneath the routine, beneath the numbness, beneath the performance, there's still a self waiting to be felt. And that's where the real healing begins. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. You can have a busy social life, a family, a partner, and still carry a deep, persistent sense of isolation. This kind of loneliness is not about being physically alone. It's about the absence of emotional connection, the kind that allows you to be seen, not just heard, not just acknowledged, but truly, deeply seen for who you are. In today's world, connection has become easier and harder at the same time. We have instant access to each other through text, stories, and status updates. We can share our thoughts with hundreds, even thousands, in a second. But in the process, something essential has been lost. The slow, quiet intimacy that builds when two people sit together with no agenda, no filter, no performance. Just presence. The emptiness many people feel today is not because they're lacking people. It's because they're lacking depth. Conversations are quick, polite, surface level. We ask how each other are, expecting nothing more than, "I'm fine" in return. We keep things light to avoid discomfort. We hide the parts of ourselves we fear others won't understand. And so, even when we're connected, we're disconnected from anything real. This emotional gap becomes even more visible in moments when you need someone, not just for advice, not just to distract you, but to sit with you in silence, to witness your pain without fixing it, to understand your confusion without needing to label it. And often, you realize you don't know who to call. Or, if you do call someone, you still feel alone after the conversation ends. That kind of disconnection doesn't just create loneliness, it creates shame. You start wondering if something's wrong with you. You think, why can't I feel close to people? Why do I feel so empty when I should feel supported? But what you're feeling isn't a flaw in your character. It's a reflection of the emotional culture around you. We live in a world that values image over authenticity. We're encouraged to present the polished version of ourselves, the version that looks successful, happy, stable. Vulnerability has been replaced by performance. Emotional honesty feels risky. So people wear emotional masks to survive in social spaces, and eventually, even they forget what's behind them. And over time, this kind of disconnection becomes your default. You don't share as much. You don't ask for help. You convince yourself that being independent is better, that needing people is weakness. But deep inside, a part of you still longs, not for attention, not for popularity, but for understanding. You want someone to ask how you are and actually mean it. Someone who doesn't flinch when you say, "I'm not okay." Without that kind of emotional safety, the emptiness begins to grow. You may stop trying to connect altogether, because connection feels exhausting. You scroll through social media, not to engage, but to numb. You become more self-protective, more reserved, even in relationships that once felt close. You may start feeling like a stranger in your own life, playing roles, saying the right things, keeping everything normal. But inside, there's a growing silence. And here's what makes this so hard. The people around you might not notice, because you're functioning, you're showing up, you're doing what's expected. But emotional disconnection is invisible until it becomes unbearable. That's when you might find yourself crying without knowing why, feeling restless in conversations, avoiding eye contact, craving silence, and fearing it at the same time. The truth is, we were never meant to go through life disconnected. Human beings are wired for emotional resonance. From the time we're born, we regulate our emotions through connection. A child stops crying when held. A nervous system calms when it feels seen. And that need never goes away. It only changes form. We need people who allow us to be soft, who sit with our sadness without rushing to cheer us up, who remind us, simply by being present, that we are not alone. We need fewer filters and more truth, fewer responses and more listening, fewer followers and more real companionship. The way back to connection doesn't begin with others. It begins with us, with the willingness to be honest, not just with others, but with ourselves. To say, "I'm lonely," without shame, to say, I need deeper connection, without guilt. It begins with small risks. Telling someone how you really feel, asking questions that go beyond the surface, staying in conversations that feel vulnerable. It's uncomfortable at first, but that discomfort is where intimacy begins. And it's worth it. Because when someone meets you in that raw, honest space, when you realize you don't have to hide or pretend or be perfect, something shifts inside you. The emptiness begins to soften. The silence feels less sharp. You start to feel, again, what so many people forget, that we are not meant to be alone in our pain or our joy or our confusion. So if you're feeling empty and everything in your life looks okay, ask yourself, when was the last time you truly felt seen? When was the last time someone understood not just your words, but your heart? That is the connection you deserve. And that is the connection you are allowed to seek, not just to feel full, but to feel human again. So if your life appears stable, successful, or even ideal from the outside, yet something inside you still feels hollow, know that you're not broken. You're simply disconnected from parts of yourself that were never given a chance to speak. Sometimes that emptiness comes from living a life that looks right but doesn't feel right, from going through routines that keep you functioning but steal your ability to feel. Sometimes it's the echo of unhealed wounds, the emotional weight of moments you never processed. And sometimes it's not about you being alone, but about you never feeling truly understood, even when surrounded by people. This emptiness is not a weakness. It's a signal, a message from your deeper self asking for reconnection with your truth, with your past, with your feelings, and with others who truly see you. You don't need to escape your life to feel whole again. You need to turn inward, to listen to the silence, to feel what you've been avoiding, to speak what's been buried, and slowly to rebuild a connection, not just to others, but to your own inner world. Because healing doesn't happen through perfection. It happens through honesty. And when you begin to live in alignment with what you truly feel, when you process what once hurt you, when you invite real connection into your life, that emptiness begins to fade. And in its place, something softer appears. Presence, clarity, peace. Not all at once, not forever, but enough to remind you, you were never truly empty. You were just waiting to be real again.